is Sam, and I work with Fairygodboss. If you didn't already know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our platform supports women throughout their careers with free resources like company reviews, job listings, webinars with various experts, virtual recruiting events, and a community where users can be honest about their triumphs and failures, either as themselves or anonymously. So welcome to our latest installment of our Discovery series. Before we get started, we will be taking questions throughout, so feel free to leave them either in the chat or in the Q&A feature. You'll see both at the bottom of your screen. You can leave questions anonymously as well if you'd like. We'll also be recording the webinar and sending it out in an email following this. So if you miss anything or you want to rewatch it, you can totally do so. Here with me today are Elissa and Sarina, and they'll be talking about all things production and development. So I'll leave it to you guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sam, for setting this up. I'm Elissa Johnson, and this is my friend and coworker,
Sarina Roma. Hi, everyone.
Yes, and so today we're going to talk about the entertainment industry, or more specifically, the area of the entertainment industry that Sarina and I work in, which is mostly documentary and nonfiction television. I work in what's called development, and Sarina works on the production side of things. So we just kind of wanted to generally talk about our background, our experience, what we do on a day-to-day, what our job titles mean, and then also the kind of collaborative nature of entertainment, specifically when it comes to working in a production company, which is what we both do. We work at Part 2 Pictures right now. I'm here more permanently. Sarina's working on one of our projects right now. Well, not working on, show running one of our projects right now that we have in production. But Part 2 Pictures, we're based in Gowanus, Brooklyn, here in New York City, and we're a documentary production company. We've done everything from Belief on OWN several years ago, a global travel series about belief systems around the world and celebrating those, to probably our longest running series, This Is Life on CNN with Lisa Ling. And we've covered everything from shows on health and wellness, like Chasing Life with Dr. Sanjay Gupta for CNN, to, as I said, belief systems and global travel documentary series. But we're considered a premium documentary production company. So everything that comes through, whether it's my department in development, which is very early stages of projects, all the way through the finished projects that Sarina does on like the production side of things and delivering them to our buyers, our clients. They're all about making sure they feel cohesive, the Part 2 brand, which is stories through a human lens. And so that's the company we work at. And then, I specifically, if you want to go that next layer down, is work in development, which it's creative development, but kind of pieces of business development, worked in. My title is Senior Director of Development, but basically I run that department. And, development is amazing because it's the very early first stage in the life cycle of any project. It's where it's kind of an idea. So we source a lot of ideas and try to figure out what is that show that we're going to make in 2 years, and start kind of planning early. It's a lot of reading and writing and putting together what we call pitch materials, because we creatively take that idea, that kind of nugget of what a show could be, and fully develop it out. You can tell the name of the department. To be a fully cohesive pitch that then we take out into the entertainment marketplace and have relationships with buyers like Netflix, HBO Max, CNN, Discovery, and many other streamers and linear cable channels. And the goal is to sell those projects that we develop internally into the marketplace and move into what becomes production. So as I mentioned, what I really love about it is it's a creative job. So there's a lot of elements of writing, of reading, trying to find good books that you can option to make into a documentary series, writing treatments that are basically the paper outline of what your show is going to be, research, trying to figure out what places in the world you want to go and film interesting stories, working one-on-one with talent to define their voice and make sure it works for what a show will be. But if I do my job right, I get to turn over kind of this whole beautiful baby of a project and creative that I've helped foster through to someone like Sarina, who then takes it and actually executes our creative vision for the series and does the real physical production. So it's funny because, you know, my friends and family are like, what are you working on now? And I'm like, well, if I do my job right, you'll see it in 2 years. Because it's very much built on creatively trying to find the right projects that will actually be made into series. But then the other half of it is a sales position. So selling shows. So that's why it's kind of nice to have 2 different skill sets in development, both trying to brainstorm and think about what will work for a TV show, but also then having the relationships with buyers, and some of those I've mentioned and a lot that we've worked with to really be able to sell your idea so that it can go into production. And then just to tell you, that's kind of my job. The day-to-day, as I said, is writing and filming, sometimes short little pieces that become our sales tape that we sell to buyers, research. So kind of those are my day-to-day things. But my career has been kind of a building block to get to this position of running a development department, of kind of overseeing a team and being able to like creatively help define what projects we're selling into the marketplace that fit our brand filter at Part 2. But as I said, like I started out in a very traditional way in entertainment as an assistant at Scott Free Productions, working specifically in documentary and nonfiction television development. So I landed nicely in a early starting position that kind of was the lane in entertainment that I wanted to walk down, which is very specific: documentary nonfiction television versus film versus scripted television. I knew kind of the lane I wanted to be in. From there, I kind of furthered my career by moving over onto the buying side and worked at a small cable channel called Pivot, which was owned by Participant Media. Then I decided I wanted to go back onto the content development side of things. So I left the buyer side, which buys projects, and went back to the producing side, sells projects, and worked at ITV America before coming over and starting at Part 2 Pictures in May. So, you know, the kind of route I took was a very traditional route in development, which is starting out as an assistant, moving to a coordinator where you take on more responsibilities and knowledge of the marketplace, what's selling, what's airing, and watching a lot of television, which is probably the best part of my job, is watching television. And then going to kind of a manager level, and then now where I'm at a kind of senior director of development, and then hope to further my career specifically in development. So what I like is I get to sit and dream up new ideas, take something like an article and figure out how you could actually make that into a television show. But the collaborative way that the entertainment industry works is honestly one of the things I love most about it. It's this way of, I won't be able to do it all myself. I have to work with my team in order to accomplish the creative that we want to sell into the marketplace. And then I get to take, like I said, this beautiful piece, not biased at all, of creative, and walk it over once it's sold and they write the check and they say, okay, go film it. I say, all right, good, I'm going to turn that over to someone who's brilliant and actually knows how to produce and takes that vision and actually executes it. And so I want to turn it over to Sarina now and kind of talk about your side of the industry, because it follows a very natural progression. As I said, the life cycle of a project starts, cultivates, sells, makes.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think if Elissa is the dreamer in this business, I am the doer. Basically, once a project is sort of handed off, I am in charge as a showrunner in almost every aspect of pre-production and post, which is sort of the life cycle of what I do. So pre-production, production, physical production, post-production. So what that means is taking these ideas that have been kind of planted, into the ground and really starting to water them and feed them and give them sunlight. So who are the right people to put on this project and the roles that I need to support the vision? Who's an expert at this? Who's the best at research? And starting to really understand who the characters we want to feature and what the stories are that we want to tell based on whatever idea that is. I'll put the people in the right places, I'll communicate with the network, and we'll start to build out what will ultimately be our production. So then going into production, we are hiring crew, and that means camera operators, that means sound recordists. I think, you know, sometimes we watch something on TV and we don't even realize how many individual bodies there are that go into making that entity come to life. And it's truly amazing. Even when you're like, let's keep it small and like do it DIY, it becomes this production because there are so many different roles. And I think that is something that is really interesting about filmmaking in general, is there's a lot of ways to get in, kind of not as just like a producer, a director, a cameraman, which are kind of, or camerawoman, I should say, which are sort of these sort of tentpole jobs related to filmmaking, but you can do sound recording, you can work with lights, you can be an assistant, you can be a producer, you can be a co-producer. There's many ways to be involved, and that's what I love about what I do, is that I kind of get to touch every role within that operation. So physical production, where are we shooting? What permits are needed to shoot at that location? Have we signed our paperwork? Have we paid the bills? Have we, you know, made sure that there's food on set? Have we rented the right equipment? Is that equipment working? All of these things from a tactical standpoint need to get done, and ultimately it's my head if they don't. And then from a story side, are our characters prepared? Do we know what questions we want to ask? What is the purpose of this scene, and how are we going into it as documentarians, and how are we able to kind of extract these ideas that we've been talking about for so long? So it's part creative, part logistics, and then once we get back from the field, we've captured all of our content, taking that material, putting it into post-production, which again opens up another, you know, series of lanes for different jobs, whether that's looking at color, looking at audio, whether that's editing, whether that's preparing materials for edit, whether that's figuring out how the stories will be told in edit. All of that I oversee. And so basically, once Elissa sort of hands it off to me, I take that seed and I say, how will we do this? Let's do this. And how will we put it together? And ultimately, where we want to end up is with a great product that takes what Elissa or whoever is in development has come up with, has dreamed up, and actually make it a reality. And it might not look exactly like what Elissa started out pitching, but it'll be pretty close. And hopefully, it'll be a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It's like that every person, that craftsmanship in entertainment, or in our industry, it's like every person that touches it, you hope that they make it a little bit better.
Yes, and it's definitely not a world that you can put everything on your own back. It is a team sport, and it requires different positions,
Yep.
and you might need a good coach, but you also really need like a good bencher, because everyone is going to have to play a role at some point. And a little bit as to how I kind of got to where I got, I was a cinema studies major in college, but it was really looking at film theory, and I was really into experimental cinema and thought that when I graduated, I would like be a video artist. But actually, what I learned more so in college, and what I was able to take into production, was communication and the ability to get things done and time management. And they're more sort of life skills that I think are really critical to being a good producer than necessarily being super savvy with the tech equipment and those sort of bits and bobs that sometimes you do learn in film school. My job is about execution. It's about making a giant to-do list and crossing things off. And when that to-do list moves to the next page, like, what are the 15 questions that I now need to answer? And, you know, ultimately just staying on top of everything and kind of being the conductor of a train. So I started out as an intern working on a documentary called Paradise Lost 3, which I ended up becoming a research on, which is an amazing documentary by an amazing filmmaker named Joe Berlinger. And from there, I sort of continued to work my way up, mostly in the story world, to really understand creative and how to put together a good story. And I think for me, the key was to just take on things that people didn't want to do, or, you know, close gaps that I saw available to me, and just always be asking questions, always learn, always really trying to figure things out, and then becoming a really valuable member of any team I was on. And so from there, I started producing, I dabbled in directing, ultimately really coming to the conclusion that I loved overseeing projects and really being able to put on my logistical cap, but also my creative cap, and merging them together. So right now, I'm working at part 2 on a series that was developed, you know, through this human lens. It is a very part 2 series, and it has to do with food, it has to do with immigration, it's storytelling, and so we're in the middle of that.
Yeah, over halfway through, which
almost,
is
yeah,
a huge feat. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something really smart, which is like I went to film school at UT in Austin, and when I started there, I didn't quite know what discipline I wanted to go into. I knew I wanted to work in television. I always, like, from very early, I loved watching television, and then when I heard that you could actually major in television, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that, like, obviously, but I didn't know, did I want to be a writer, did I want to be a director, did I want to be a producer, and kind of those are the big, well-known blocks, I would say, jobs in our industry. But through taking classes in film school and then doing an internship in development, I found a place where I could still be creative and read a lot, watch a lot of television, key again, and but also have a producer mindset. So I can kind of bounce around on a couple of different things, but it's really overseeing the creation of, like, pitch materials. So you have to produce the pitch materials, but you also have to be able to have an eye for, or, you know, an eye for story. Like, what makes a good story at the end of the day that other people will want to watch, whether it's a, you know, multi-part limited series that's only going to be 6 hours, or it's going to be a hosted series that's going to run for 100 episodes. Being able to package it in the right way is really a big piece of my job.
And I think what Elissa does is almost make like a mini story arc, where she sort of maps out, you know, in 5 minutes or in 5 pages what something could be. And what we do is actually make that into what it is. And that could be a 20-minute short. It could be an 8-part series. The show we're doing right now is a 10-part series. So again, it's sort of doing what I do at the dreamer stage.
Yeah, at the dreamer stage. I mean, and that's exactly it. It's like the goal would be, you can, we build what we call log lines, right? So this idea of saying, one of our recent announcements, I can share this with you guys, was a new series with Lisa Ling that's going to be on HBO Max. It's all about seeing births, weddings, funerals, right? And so the log line of that show is Lisa Ling travels around the world to get to know different cultures through the lens of specific, like, human stories of births, weddings, and funerals in each place. So that's what we call, like, the log line of the series. It's a 1-sentence breakdown of what you'll see that then kind of not only shows the creative, but also the kind of places you could go, right? So, like, what I build from that log line is, like, we're gonna go to places like Japan, we're gonna go to one US, and so you start to kind of build out what then that log line then looks like as an actual show. But I love the fact that then I can go to a showrunner and say, like, this is kind of what we sold, will you please go actually make it?
And I think a lot changes, right? Like, you could sell through an idea that ultimately, once you start looking into the practical realities of filming it, or the ultimate creative that you have landed on for other episodes, sometimes the puzzle pieces don't always fit into the puzzle that you bought or sold, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, what we can do is figure out the best version of whatever it is that we are making, and hopefully always deliver on some semblance of a promise to our buyers.
That's the piece of the collaboration between our departments is, like, I won't be able to go make this. So we always say, like, is it producible? Like, you can dream all you want, but if you can't physically, like, if you sell a series set in, I don't know,
Antarctica, you better be able to shoot the whole series in Antarctica.
Exactly. Like, I can be like, it would be great to do a documentary series on scientists in Antarctica. And it's like, okay, that's a cool idea, but I can't go sell that because I have to have access to the scientific stations in Antarctica. We need to know what characters we're going to be able to go and find there and actually film with. And so it's a balance between dreaming up really cool ideas and actually placing them not only at a network, the sales piece of my job, but also in a way that then you don't really mess up your producer to be like, I sold a series, you can make it, right? And you're like, no, there's no human way to actually make this.
Yeah, and I think for a long time, you know, I did work in development a little bit, and I realized I was just more like, I just wanted to get it done.
Yeah.
And so I think for you, there's some like emotions involved, because not everything that you do comes out the way, not everything that you do gets made, and not everything that you do comes out the way that you intended it to. But again, you always hope for the best, and you have to be willing to part with some amazing ideas, or hopefully just put them in your back pocket and save them for later.
Oh yeah, we call back burner ideas a lot, where you're like, okay, this is a brilliant idea, I know and I believe in it, but I can't make it right now. It's not going to sell, or it's not the right time. But I think it's just really, leave you guys with anything, it's the idea that it's a cool industry because you get to work on a lot of creative things, and it's a team sport, as you said.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, welcome back, Sam. So we've been just chit-chatting, but are there any questions we can answer?
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in. I noticed we only have a few more minutes. So if you have any questions right now, feel free, again, to leave them in the Q&A or the chat. We did have a few come through already. Right. So one question we have is, how do you pitch a TV show or a pilot to networks, and how do you secure sponsors to help pay for the production?
Yeah, I'll take this one because pitching is my primary job responsibility, probably. And so, you know, I work at a production company, so we have established relationships with networks. So through both our relationships and representation with WME, which is a talent agency, they help us submit projects to networks. So I would say you have to have relationships with networks or partner with production companies to be able to submit projects to them. Almost every network will have a way that they talk about unsolicited materials, and most don't actually take unsolicited materials. But if you're an independent producer, oftentimes you can submit through either, if you have an agent, through that route, or an entertainment lawyer. An entertainment lawyer can sometimes, they'll have relationships with the networks, that's how you get away around the kind of unsolicited material clause that most networks have. And then as far as sponsorships, like we don't actually work with sponsors that often because we sell projects to the buyers, whether it's streamers or linear cable channels, and they have the sponsorship built in on their end. So I would say that that's kind of not really part of our purview.
Got it. Another question we have from the audience is there a way I can get into writing instead of broadcasting? And how would I do that?
Yeah, so if you want to be a writer, I think the number one advice I have is write. There's a lot of great books online if you're like starting out as a writer, as far as being able to like understand the style of writing for whether it's film or scripted television. And nonfiction and documentary television, which we do, there is a good amount of writing that's usually in like a treatment, which as Sarina alluded to, we make a lot that kind of walks through the creative of the show on paper, but it's very different than like writing a pilot or writing a screenplay. So I would say if you're starting out, order the books about how to write for a 3-act structure if you're looking to write films, or for television specifically, sometimes there's different act breakdowns, but it's basically the kind of storytelling beats that you'll need to have regardless of what story you're telling. And then if you're kind of looking to build your community of writers, would be that next step. So sometimes there's different networking opportunities you can go to and meet other writers. There's writers groups that I know a lot of my screenwriting friends are a part of, that they share their materials with each other, and it makes you a better writer. And then as you build those relationships and write your screenplays or your pilots or your spec scripts, then sometimes those kind of relationships help lead to sales further down the line. But usually it's through networking or, as I said, submitting via the proper channels of entertainment lawyers or agents.
That kind of leads into the next question we have from an anonymous attendee who wants to know about networking specifically in television. They're asking, are there any like networking events or any groups I should be looking for? I know it's not as traditional as a business office networking event.
Yeah, I mean, we have industry conferences and networking groups. I would point you to HRTS, or if you work kind of in like, it's more on the early side of your career, JHRTS. I think it stands for Hollywood Radio and Television Society. That's probably one of our biggest like industry standardized like networking groups, and they're really great. You know, reading the trades, so Variety, Real Screen Magazine specifically for the documentary and like reality and nonfiction unscripted side of the business is our biggest trade. Hollywood Reporter. And I would say, do you have any other networking ones that?
You know, early on in my career, somebody just said, if you know anyone, ask them. Like, our business is so much about connections and communicating. And it's like, if your, you know, grandma's hairdresser's nephew is a producer, like, just reach out, ask for coffee on their schedule. Everyone in this business everyone has asked for help at some point. And so it's never something to be scared of. So if you hear of anyone or you know of anything, you know, just reach out and ask. There's also opportunities for, I would say, like production assisting on low budget productions that could be good. And if you wanted to check with like your local university film department, even sort of volunteering to PA on student productions is a great way to start learning and meeting people who ultimately might also be in the business one day.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just agreeing. I was like, that's exactly it. I will say that every job I've ever gotten has been because of a relationship that I've had.
Cool. And then I know we're about out of time, but I want to get to this last question that we have here today. Is there any way I can work in television and not live in New York or in Hollywood?
It's an interesting time.
I mean, yeah, yes. And those are the two centers of our entertainment industry. So I would say that's definitely identifying places with opportunity. But yeah, I think there are a lot of places, you know, more on the production side.
Well, I think a few things. One, you can definitely work in news anywhere. So journalism or local broadcasting is definitely something that's accessible in almost every major city. The other thing is that today with, you know, YouTube and communications like Zoom, there are opportunities for remote work, and I think it's not for all positions because I do think being with your team is really important. But, you know, writing and fact checking and researching, these are all positions that can actually be done from elsewhere. So if living in a remote area or a place where there is no access to production, doing things like that is possible. The other thing I'll say is there are a lot of productions that in incentivized states in the country. So like Atlanta's a big hub for production. Chicago has production. There are places in major cities, you just sort of have to seek them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Elissa and Sarina. This was a great conversation. Again, this will be sent out in an email, so if you missed anything, you can find all of it and rewatch it there. It will also be on the website, so feel free to visit it then. And thank you for joining in today. Really appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.